Hello, my name's Angela from Angela Simpson Functional Medicine. Thanks for joining me today. And I'd like to talk to you about heavy metals and how they could be one of the potential hidden causes for your ongoing symptoms of hormone imbalance. And if you do feel like you've been suffering with hormone imbalance symptoms for a long, long time, you've tried lots of the things that have been typically suggested by other practitioners or things you've looked up on the internet, and you still feel like you haven't gotten to the root cause of why you still have these symptoms, I do suggest you listen in here. And so, why is this one of the hidden causes of hormone imbalance? Well, there's several different reasons, but one of the main ones is that when we have a buildup of heavy metals in our body, we actually start to disrupt our endocrine system, which is our hormone system. It's what allows our hormones to communicate. It allows our hormones to be produced at optimal levels, and it allows our hormones to also be detoxified and eliminated properly so that we can keep the balance in our hormonal system. Often women do have enough or the proper amount of hormone being produced in their body for their age, but their processing centers aren't working properly. And so there's different sabotagers to our processing centers, our liver and our gut, for our hormones, and heavy metals is definitely one of them. It also can be a really big disruptor to the thyroid. So if you also potentially have any thyroid symptoms or you know you have a thyroid diagnosis, it's also really important to listen in on this. And what are some of the symptoms? So some of the common symptoms are resistant weight loss. So maybe you've tried the most typical things like diet and exercise, and maybe it's worked for you at some point, but it stopped working. And you've concluded that it's because of your hormones and just the stage that you're at in your life. But it could also be related to heavy metals. It can really start to slow down our metabolism if we have heavy metals interfering with that process. Brain fog, really, really common to have a heavy metals buildup if we have brain fog. And again, we assume it's related to our hormones because it happens at certain times in our cycle, if we're still cycling as a female. Or again, maybe you have a known underlying thyroid condition, and this is one of the common symptoms as well. So you assume it's all related to the thyroid, but the thyroid can be very disrupted by heavy metals as well. Another common symptom, chronic fatigue. This is so common. And, of course, chronic fatigue can come from various different sources. But if you feel like you have tried some of the typical treatments for fatigue and you still can't seem to beat it no matter what you do, I do suggest you also look into the potential of having a heavy metals buildup if you're just always exhausted no matter what you do. Because it can really interfere with our mitochondria, which are the powerhouses in our cells that help us to produce energy. And if we have a buildup of heavy metals, these mitochondria literally are just interfered with and they can't work on a daily basis. So no matter how much sleep you get, how great your diet and exercise protocol is, if you're still having this fatigue and you can't figure it out, again, I suggest you look at heavy metals. Mood swings, really, really common as well. So when we have a buildup of heavy metals, some of the common mood changes can be anxiety, can be depression, can be anger, irritability. Again, this is really, really common with just hormone imbalance symptoms as well, but it's maybe not that we've figured out the root cause of where it's coming from. And so heavy metals can be a hidden cause for these mood swings as well. One of the reasons is the heavy metals can build up in one of our primary detox centers, our liver. And if our liver is not detoxifying well, we often will experience more of that irritability and anger, especially at certain key times of our cycle if we're still cycling as females. Another symptom that's very, very common for females when they're in perimenopause, especially, is heavy bleeding, potentially even clotting. Sometimes you may or may not know, but you might have a diagnosis of fibroids, which can also cause those symptoms, and or potentially even ovarian cysts, but which sometimes can cause more so pain. Some women don't know about this, but if they do have severe pain at certain times in their cycle, often more around ovulation, but again, too, around the time of their period, it's good to get this checked too. But again, we want to figure out what the cause of that is. Why are these endocrine organs not functioning properly for us? And heavy metals can be one of those underlying hidden root causes. And so, where do these heavy metals come from? So one of the most common sources is from our water. And so if you do drink tap water, I'm not saying all tap water is bad, but there often is a buildup of metals in our tap water amongst other toxins. So one really quick solution for this is to always drink filtered water. I mean, sometimes we get in a pinch and we can't, but ideally, if you don't have a system in your house, you can even just get something that sits on top of your counter that you fill up with the tap every day and you have the filtration, and it actually does start to filter out some of those heavy metals. So Acantevia is great for this. The newer Britas, I believe, also now do filter heavy metals, as does a Berkey water filter. So just to give you some tips there, just so that we're not continuously bringing in more metals without knowing it, because that's one of the most common sources. The air we breathe, especially if we live in a densely populated area, an area where there's lots of buildings, lots of people, lots of exhaust from vehicles. There's just various different sources of metals coming in, even from just breathing, believe it or not. And then one of the other causes is foods. And so some people, might know the more common ones, such as eating those deep, big water fish. They sometimes are more built up with mercury in particular, some shellfish as well. But also we can get metals coming in from pesticides. Rice also is actually quite high in arsenic, believe it or not, especially the brown rice. So we always think that eating things, that are brown and not white might be better for us because of the fiber content. But in the case of rice, it actually can be higher in arsenic. So it's just something to watch for. And then also, if you have had any medications that you've had to be on, some people might be on medications long term. Sometimes there is actually some fillers in there that do contain some metals. As well as vaccines. So some vaccines have aluminum in them, some vaccines have mercury in them. So we can also get the exposure this way. Secondhand smoke, or of course primary smoke if you're smoking, or if you have in the past. There's quite a few metals in here. Cadmium's a common one. Plastics and coffee actually also have metals in them, believe it or not. Even some of the good sources of coffee, they still can have metals. And so, it's important to know that we're just exposed to metals all the time, and we can't get rid of it entirely. It's coming into our bodies on a daily basis. And our body does have some ability to detoxify some of these metals, which is great. But sometimes we can get to a point where we have a buildup in our body, depending on our lifestyle, depending on how efficiently genetically we detoxify. Some of us don't detoxify efficiently. And so we're more prone to getting a buildup of these metals in our body over time. I have some of those genetics, and I know that because I've tested myself for it. So it's really important that we just understand that we can't get rid of it completely, but we can learn how to get rid of these metals if we actually know that they're in our body. So how do we do this? And so there is some testing that you can do to look for metals buildup in your body, especially to the point that it could be toxic. And so there's a couple of tests. One of the main ones that has been done for a long time is a urine test. It's called a provocative urine test. So it actually, you do have to take something that provokes those metals to be released from your organ system and get picked up by your bloodstream, and then you excrete them in the urine. And so this is a challenge test. And this is accurate. Sometimes people would say it's not always safe to do because it does start to lift metals out of your body. And again, if people aren't necessarily efficient at detoxifying them, it can sometimes cause a lot of symptoms just to actually do the lab testing alone. But that's one of the main tests, is through urine. And then another test that actually has become quite a bit more popular, and the validity is quite good on this test as well. That's really good, actually, is a hair minerals and a hair metals test. And the reason for this is because when we have a buildup of heavy metals in our body, it often actually will also display certain minerals. So the hair test looks at the metals in your body as well as the potential of how it's affected your minerals. And again, this also can affect how you detox in your body. So these are the main two tests. And then once you know if you do have a buildup of heavy metals in your body, you do have to learn how to get rid of them. And so it's really, really important to know that if you find this out, you can't necessarily, well, you can, but you might not do well if you try and just dive in to a heavy metals cleanse and try and get rid of the metals that are built up in your body. It's really important that you understand how your detox systems are functioning before you do this. And so the primary detox systems in our body are our liver and our gut, and then our skin would be the backup system. But if these systems aren't working efficiently, even if you try and do a metals cleanse, you won't necessarily always get rid of all those metals when you're doing the detox process. Sometimes what will happen is those metals can actually start to lift out of the organ system, and they can even recirculate in your body and your bloodstream, and they can actually end up making you feel quite sick, and they can even cause more damage. So it's really, really important that you understand the status of your gut health, your liver health, your detoxification efficiency before you do this. So it's really, really important that you work with a practitioner that understands this, understands what's going on in your body before you do the metals cleanse. And then from there, how you actually get rid of the metals, ideally in a safe way, is there are some specific herbal products. There's also some specific foods that you can take at certain times of day. Again, it has to be guided by a practitioner so you understand how to do this safely, that can help to slowly start getting rid of those metals from your body. And the great part of this is if this is one of the hidden root causes of your hormone imbalance symptoms, you will start to feel better quite quickly as long as you do the detox process correctly. So I hope this gives you some answers. If you do feel like you have been suffering from symptoms of hormone imbalance for ages, maybe you feel like you've been in perimenopause for 10 or 15 years, or maybe it's even something that's just come on more recently, but you still can't figure it out. I highly, highly recommend that you either contact me because I'm able to administer this testing, or someone in your area, someone that you already know and trust, that can help you with the whole picture. They understand hormone imbalance symptoms. They understand the gut and liver detox pathways and how they have to be working properly for you to get rid of these heavy metals to try and get your hormones balanced. Also understanding the hormonal system and how often this is not the primary cause of your problems. And so it's often really, really important to look at the liver and gut pathways first, and then to look at things like this second, and then actually to look at things like, for example, rebalancing your hormones through things like HRT or other specific hormone treatments last, not first. Whereas if you do the reverse order, you often won't feel better if it's not the root cause of your issues, which it most often is not. So again, I hope this gives you some answers. If you have more questions, please let me know. You can always go to my website, www.angelasimpsonfunctionalmedicine.ca. I'm happy to have a complimentary consult with you for 45 minutes to discuss if this or some other form of treatment is going to be helpful for you to get to the root cause of your issues and get your hormones rebalanced for the long term and not just managing symptoms. Thanks and take care.